He's called it the Rape Gang Inquiry.
Right.
So you can find it on Crowdfunding, the Rape Gang Inquiry. I've 100% cleared my diary. I'm at the disposal of the inquiry team.
Yeah.
And I've said to him, I'll go wherever, whenever.
Yeah. Cover up now is covering up that there was a cover up.
Yeah. It's a cover up of the cover up. And of course, Maggie Oliver's launched her own justice funding campaign for private prosecutions.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is a returning guest again, Miah. Thank you very much.
Oh, a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
Your year since January of this year has been fantastic. I mean, I've always thought you needed more attention, but this year to a certain extent you've got it. You've been on all the big podcasts now across the country that I can see. You're discussing the issues about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, and more recently you've been invited on by Rupert Lowe, the former Reform candidate MP. Because he's putting together an investigation?
He's called it the Rape Gang Inquiry.
Right. So
you can find it on Crowdfunding, the Rape Gang Inquiry. It's the largest crowdfunder I've ever seen publicly funded in this way. Over £600,000 raised so far, in the main from ordinary people.
Yep.
I think they had about 20,000 different people who donated. You can see it yourself online when you go on. And he's in many ways honoured a pledge that Reform made at the time when this scandal broke, which was that if the government didn't support an inquiry, they would fund one themselves, they would launch one themselves.
I remember that.
At the time, Nigel Farage did launch a public inquiry, and I think that's his enthusiasm. I think, I'm not one to criticise if I can help it. It's his enthusiasm, and he didn't quite understand that they didn't have statutory powers. And I made it clear to people, I said, they don't have statutory powers at the time. And I said, we were pushing for a public inquiry, a national inquiry, we need to push. And clearly, Nick, we don't have the luxury of choice. I'm a working class bloke. I got, what I mean by that is I wore the clothes I was given. Yeah. I ate the food that was put in front of me because there was nothing else, and we knew not to ask for things because what we had was the best that our parents could do for us. Yeah. So when I say I don't have the luxury of choice, it's a mantra I've took with me in my life. So I try and make the best of the situation I find around me, instead of wishing for things I can't change.
And that's what the left tend to do.
Yeah.
If only we lived in utopia.
Yeah.
But do you know what? We don't.
And I know, as you know, this Labour government is not going to give us a national inquiry.
Yeah.
And we know why. We've spoken about that, but we know they're not.
They think it'll be the end of them.
We know the Conservatives can bring as many motions to Parliament as they want, but with the massive majority Labour have got, that will never change.
Yeah.
So I look at the Conservatives and what they're doing, I think, great. Keeps it in public attention, they're the official opposition. And sorry, when very posh sounding young women like Katie Lamb get up and recite some of the stuff in there, it resonates, doesn't it, in a way a northern bloke like me's accent wouldn't, yeah? So let them carry on doing what they're doing. It's a value. For me, it's a value, them doing what they're doing.
Even though they wasted 14 years by not doing anything.
I think a lot of that was a financial decision. They made an economic decision that that an inquiry into this would cost money, and it's money they didn't want to spend on it. They made a decision that working class girls weren't worth it because they're not in this mess in the same way Labour are. Labour are complicit.
I think they made this decision in 14 years, not about money. I think they made a decision as in, if we take the lid of this can of worms, we have no idea where it's going to lead to. We have no idea. We know it's going to damage Labour, great, but it could rebound and heal us. We don't know what some of our councillors have been up to. And I just think they've gone status quo, we're in power.
Yeah, the establishment take care of the establishment, their uni party. Yeah, so Rupert launched this thing, and when I first saw it, I watched it like you would have done, like people would have done, and within days it had raised £100,000. Yeah, it reached its first target, reached its second target, got to £500,000 quite comfortably, and I think it's kind of stalled now around 600,000. And I think there are reasons why it's stalled where it has now, including like the Easter holidays and things like that. But I also think there's other things like the fallout between Rupert Lowe and his former Reform colleagues. People don't like to see the airing of dirty laundry in public. I think that has a consequence of the effect on that. And of course, Maggie Oliver's launched her own justice funding campaign for private prosecutions. So again, I don't think, will people support it one, they'll support the other one rather than come back and give another statement and donation. And also, I don't think the wider public enjoy seeing us doing different things. I think the consensus of the people I speak to who've contributed to both. So Raja would prefer if everyone was working together on this. And even if they're not working together, we'd like it if everyone sat around the table together and agreed what they were going to do and what someone else was going to do and how they could keep each other informed. So some form of compact between I hope we see sooner rather than later between Maggie Oliver and Rupert Lowe, I think.
And people like action as well. So maybe if the 600,000 then is used doing stuff and people can see things being done, people then are more willing to give as well because things are happening.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. But it's not been a month yet, and he's raised £600,000. So I'm not criticising. I'm thinking, well, amazing, absolutely amazing, and it's captured. It's the mood of the nation, isn't it? Very much so. It doesn't matter where you go, you speak to, people are outraged at what's took place. And the only people who are defending it are those who politically benefit from the existing situation continuing as it is. And the blind ideologues, which we're never going to win over anyway, so ignore those people. So Rupert Lowe's launched this crowdfunder, and he's very clear. He wants to try and get to the truth of what happened, why it was allowed to happen, and get the truth out there. And yes, it's not a statutory inquiry, and I've spoken to him, and I'm like, even though it's not a statutory inquiry, there are things it can still do that will help raise public awareness as to what really took place, and join some of the dots together, and present a body of evidence to the nation. Because this is independent. This has never been done before in this country. Present a body of evidence to the nation, and that will create a tsunami, in my opinion.
It might be the tipping point we've been waiting for, or it might not be, but it's pushed us up 2 steps closer to the tipping point. Eventually, we'll hit the tipping point, and nobody will be able to stop what happens next.
And in the, I don't have a luxury of choice. I would have preferred a national inquiry. Where I go and testify, but that's not the case. Rupert Lowe's come along with this, and I am duty bound to support it. I think, so I was.
So have they approached you?
Yeah. I spoke to Rupert a couple of times. He gave me a call. I'd spoken to him in January. To his credit, when this scandal first broke in January, he found a way of getting in touch with me and called me and spoke to me at the time so we could better understand what had gone on. To his credit, he didn't have to do that. He didn't know who I was beyond people telling him, you need to speak to Raja Miah, you need to speak to Raja Miah. So he came and found Raja Miah, and we had a conversation. And
how many other MPs have ever done that?
No.
0. So that says a lot there, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's not through want of offering.
Oh yeah, I know.
And he went away, and he came back once he launched his inquiry and said, Raja, where will you be most effective? I said, I'd probably be most effective, Mr. Lowe, where you've sent me out. Because there are people you've got like Esther McVeigh and stuff who are, she's a Bernardo's child herself, I think, who are you need on there because they understand the levers of power, they can get things done. But, who do you send out onto the streets? Who do you send out into the community? Who do you send out into the towns and cities where this has happened to try and understand what actually happened and speak to people? And I think, that's where my skill set is probably best used. So my aspiration is I will be going to at least 50 towns and cities and speaking to, not necessarily survivors. I think Sammy Woodhouse is on the team, and I think Sammy is better placed to speak to survivors, but I'm better placed to try and make sense of the environment in which it was allowed to take place. Because I know what I'm looking for. I can make sense of that. I can speak to people, and I think that's what I'll do. Now, I was very clear with Rupert Lowe when we agreed that's what I do, is that I would take no money for it. this is a calling. I've ended up in a place where I know this is the place where I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
I feel at ease with it. It doesn't matter if I make money from it. It doesn't matter if I don't make money from it. I've got by, and I'll get by until the end of this. And for me, we'll get to the public inquiry. We'll get the truth out. We'll hold, and the truth has got to be, why was it allowed to happen? And I'm very clear. There are a number of features here. One is clearly the class dynamic we've spoken about of the white working class and being considered, who cares?
Yeah.
But I also believe, and if you follow my work on Lex, you'll have seen it, there's a challenge within our ethnic minority communities, in particular our Pakistani community. And it's not exclusively them, but some of the cultural norms, traditions that allows this to happen. Or I'm not saying encourages it, and that when it does happen, it happens in a certain way. And in any other setting, we would identify what those risk factors were, and we, in a civilized society, we would put in place safeguards to make sure those risk factors are contained or minimized.
A little bit like what we did with FGM.
Yeah.
Imported cultural practice that we didn't want and didn't like, and then we had to tackle it, and we tackled it through education, through prosecutions, through social services, through lots of things, trying to stop this imported cultural practice that we didn't want here.
And let me give you an example. And I struggle with this because I'm learning as I'm always learning. I think anyone who says that they have all the answers to all the questions on this is, I'd put my drink down and I'd leave. It's just stupidity. I think with this, one of the features has got to be the culture within certain communities that allows them and encourages them to view the other with contempt and less than, so where they can then rape children and gang rape children. Yeah. And there are cultural factors at play here that we don't talk about. So they want to talk to you in the schools about slavery and slavery reparations, when we know the slavery they talk about hasn't existed in your lifetime, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your great-great, and so on. Yeah.
And when we talk about slavery, we only ever mean the transatlantic
and the transatlantic slave trade. Yeah.
Not the millions who were taken by the Ottomans.
No.
From Europe.
Yeah.
Not the Arab slave trade. Not the millions in Turkey. It's always
not the slave trade that's now in the Middle East now. Where it's it's
in Africa now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, I think needs to happen, is understand what are the traditions and cultural norms that these people believe in, and challenge some of that, and say, look, this is wrong. No one has ever had a conversation in our education system with children in schools to say the 1971 rape genocide between East and West Pakistan was abhorrent, was wrong. It's a war crime.
I'd never heard of that until 2 months ago, and it was on one of your feeds on Twitter, and I went, Googled it, found the Wikipedia page, read it, and went, never heard of any of this in my life.
But does it make sense now? Do you see?
I then wrote an article on it.
Brilliant.
I wrote then on Substack an article about this is why this happened in the UK, because look what's happened before. This is culturally acceptable. This is promoted about how you punish people who are not like you. This is an act of what that, and so I linked both, saying this is how people didn't turn up in this country and go, where's the white girls at?
Yeah.
This is deeper than that. We have to look culturally and historically. So I'm glad you put that.
No.
I learned a lot on that.
And there was pushback, from people I know. Said, we've moved on. I said, no, we've not moved on, because all they've done is they might not be raping your daughters anymore, but they moved on to raping other people's daughters.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've got to understand why it was allowed. And I'm not blaming any Pakistani person who lives here, but you've got to educate people so that they own what took place, so they're aware of how it can happen, and the resilience to it. Is that not a duty we have? So that's one of the things I hope to be doing because I think there are cultural reasons. How did these people legitimize what they did?
Yeah,
it's a dangerous question, Nick. Yeah. But it's a question that has to be asked, because in this setting there are at least 4 partners, 4 interconnecting elements. One is, of course, the victims and the survivors. One is the perpetrators. One is those who are meant to support them. And the other one is the actual infrastructure who, when they knew how did they react? There are four, and we need to go and uncover what took place at all four of those to make sense of it. We can't just focus on the survivors and say, isn't it terrible what happened to you? We can't just say Islam is at fault, which is what I see more and more of it. And I think there is some legitimacy in that. There are some some beliefs in my own faith, like there are in other faiths, but in this case, we're talking about my faith. There are some beliefs in my faith, some cultural norms attached to that faith that are not conducive with our way of life. So, for instance, the Arabs and the sex slaves and stuff, and how they legitimized, sex slavery through religion and stuff. We at some point we've got to be brave enough to call this out for what it is and say these are all of the factors at play. Objectively. I'm not then saying, ban Islam or do this or do that. We've got to objectively look at all of the factors at play that allow this to take place across all of the key players in this. The perpetrators, the survivors, the frontline services who are meant to engage and act, and also the political layer that were complicit in the cover-up. And what I'll be doing for Rupert Law, I think, is going to the 50 towns and cities, and then there's actually more than 50, but going to the 50 over the next year or so, I think, and speaking with people like me and you who are aware of what took place, and giving them a space so they can at least share their perspectives, because we will learn. If 50 social workers from the 50 different towns and cities came forward, what's the government scared of? If 50 police officers who were told to look the other way shared their views and opinions, and that's what I hope to be doing for Rupert. And of course, what he's doing on X and what his team are doing on X is brilliant. They've put in, I think, 1,000 freedom of information requests already all across the country.
He's excellent at that.
Yeah, he's relentless. Absolutely relentless, methodical. He's clearly working with the Open Justice guys, because you're seeing he's releasing court transcripts or snippets of court transcripts, so they've got that. So he's already been working with that. And Sammy Woodhouse is already speaking with survivors. And what you've got is the Maggie Oliver thing was only triggered after what Rupert Lowe did. Let's be clear. So Maggie Oliver has been pushed as well to a place, well, actually, if Rupert Lowe is doing this, what can I do? And she's found the right place, which is she's pursuing private prosecutions. So hopefully they will sit down and talk to each other at some point, hopefully.
So talk about Maggie's private prosecutions, because we discussed it in another episode, but people watching this might not know what that's about.
So Maggie Oliver, 2 weeks after Rupert Law he'd raised £500,000 by that point, announced that she was launching something, and she went on to GB News and Good Morning Britain and all the rest of it. And I want to raise this point because I think it's important. The rape gang inquiry that Rupert Law's announced has had no publicity. None of the mainstream, it's been a media blackout.
It's just on X.
It's been a complete media blackout. Which says everything, I think, as to the cover-up, because the cover-up continues. Because he's not doing the party politically or anything. In fact, he's got people on board from different political views and beliefs, and his position has always been this issue is more than politics. It transcends politics, and he wants to work with people from across as broad a spectrum as possible.
I think we're at a stage now where the cover-up isn't about covering up the grooming gangs. The cover-up now is covering up that there was a cover-up.
It's the cover-up of the cover-up.
Exactly. And that's why nobody wants it now. It's not because they're scared of what they covered up. No, they're scared of uncovering that there was a cover-up.
So, he's done that without, because Maggie Oliver is the face of this, isn't she?
She is.
And she does very well. She does very. Good Morning Britain has the news will have everyone
loves Maggie Oliver,
and rightly so. Rightly so.
Everyone loves Maggie Oliver,
and this campaign needs people like Maggie Oliver, because Maggie Oliver can get into the living rooms that in a way I couldn't, and as Rupert Law's finding, in a way he couldn't. Or Sammy Woodhouse, or anyway, because Maggie Oliver she's a brand, isn't she? And And what she's announced is a justice fund. So she wants to raise money essentially to take out private prosecutions against those who are complicit in what took place at the time.
Yeah.
So those who failed the children at the time, and I think from her own story, it's those who closed down Operation Augusta. The operation that allowed 97 members of a rape gang to walk free, and no police officer or council official can work out who closed that investigation down, and all the minutes have gone missing. So she wants to go after them. And
I discussed that with her on one of my podcasts, and she said there was 3 or 4. She knows the number. It was either 3 or 4 senior police officers who have all gone on now, chief constables basically, sat in a meeting, Veterans Police, who decided to close it all down. The minutes are missing. One of the other reports interviewed those officers, and none of them can remember who it was that said we close this down.
Of course.
And what she said was joint enterprise, like we do with a criminal.
Yeah.
All of them should be sacked.
I'm with her. I think the country's with her. No one's disagreeing.
Yeah. When I ran for mayor of Greater Manchester last year to replace Andy Burnham, one of my policies, it's all documented, it's all online. One of my policies was the day I start, I'm going to put a committee together with people like Maggie Oliver, yourself, Bill, lots of people, to go through every report that's ever been done in Greater Manchester, highlight names of people from those reports who were incompetent, looked the other way, dereliction of duty in the police, and we were going to sack them, and then let them take us to court for unfair dismissal, and we'll have it all out in court. And I wanted to do something I knew I could do, and if Chief Constable would have refused, I'd sacked him until I found a Chief Constable willing to do what I want him to do.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So that's what she's doing. She's taking out private prosecutions, I think, against police officers, because that's about,
Yeah.
And we've all got our own motives, haven't we? To claim otherwise. Maggie Oliver would not be doing this work if she hadn't been treated the way she'd been treated at the time the police treated her.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a fire as to why they've come here. Yeah. So good on her. So she wants to take private prosecution against police officers. I'm encouraging her to also do a test case against some politicians. I think that the three that obviously come to mind. One is the former chief executive of, former leader of Telford Council, who's now an MP. Sean Davis, I think his name is. My apologies if I got it wrong, but he sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee, because you'll find this, won't you? These people move on into prominent positions, don't they? Yeah. The other one is clearly my bugbear is Jim McMahon, who was, clearly the evidence is conclusive as far as I'm concerned in terms of his role whilst he was leader of the council whilst he was leader of the council. And I think the evidence against the likes of Andy Burnham is there. I think the evidence against Angela Rayner is there. Angela Rayner released a statement because, if you're part of the cover-up, you're part of the cover-up. She released a statement on Commons letterheaded paper defending Andy Burnham's assurance review as being, all singing, all dancing great. I'd wager that at the time she released that statement, she'd not even read the report.
It wouldn't surprise me if she's never read the report.
No, she's never read the report.
Politicians don't read the reports they commission.
But then she's part of the cover, though, isn't she? Because Andy Burnham has now acknowledged that his report was limited.
No.
So you're stuck, aren't you? So actually, you it's joint enterprise, isn't it? Off you go, and that.
But her saying that validates his report.
Yeah, validates his report. So she knew what he was doing, and then at that point, I was left with, well, Roger, Angela Rayner, working class girl from Tameside, is supporting this. Why would she not want an investigation into working class white girls being,
Because she wants to be Prime Minister.
She wants to be Prime Minister. So I hope, win or lose, I hope Maggie Oliver does that. Yeah. Because I think we've won. The moment she does it, we've won. The moment the papers go in and we know Chief Superintendent such and such a body, MP such and such a body, leader of the council or the senior, social services person. The minute we know that's happened, it escalates it to a whole new level. So she's doing that. Rupert's doing his own thing.
Have we got any timelines for the Rupert stuff and your stuff?
He's working at a pace, and I've worked at my own pace for a long time. Yeah. But I follow his work the same as you guys follow his work, and he's got a team around him. If I was honest with you, I'm being honest, but if I was honestly looking at this, with my understanding of how these things play out. Yeah, my experiences. Of course, my experiences now might be completely blown out of the water with what's took place. But my experience of this would be, if it's national, we're going to 50 towns and cities, we're doing this, we're going to have the open sort of testimony, we're going to do things where the purpose is what we uncover, then encourage other people to uncover, and it all unravels. Then, and we produce something at the end that exposes it for all it is. The end game surely has got to be one of three things. One is to shame the establishment, the police, the politicians of all persuasions, so the nation knows the extent of the cover-up, and that's an outcome in itself. Yeah. Second is to then use what we uncover and release in a coherent way, that the mainstream political parties who want to pick up on that and drive the manifestos for the next general election. And the third one has got to be the forcing of prosecutions. And what I've been pushing for is in terms of justice for some of these, for all of the survivors, is there's got to be some form of mandatory compensation scheme. We've done it for Windrush. It exists in Northern Ireland for the survivors. And I've met some of these survivors, and the former leader in my council, Amanda Chadderton, claimed he can't say it destroyed their lives. I've sat and I've cried. It has destroyed their lives.
For clarity, for people watching this, Amanda Chadderton is the former leader of Oldham Council. When she was the leader of Oldham Council, she stood up in the chamber in Oldham Town Hall. It's on video. You can Google it on YouTube, and she stands up and says, "What? Give me almost word for word."
You can't say it destroyed their lives.
And she was talking about the victims of the grooming gangs.
They were screaming in the public gallery when she said that. You can't say it destroyed their lives.
I know people who know Amanda Chadderton.
She works at Manchester Council. I remember. I come from the same world you do, Nick. I know she.
Yes, I know.
I know her partner. I know who was a senior councillor, and all of.
It's amazing that she would, even if she believed it. I cannot comprehend anyone who thought, I need to say this.
Well, after we got rid of her, the truth is also that she went on to be a key member of Yvette Cooper's team.
Yes.
So the Labour Party took care. She said that.
Yeah. So she got ousted to a nice job at Westminster under the Labour Party. Yeah.
So I think, I'm thinking vaster timeline, but from what I've seen of Rupert Lowe so far, he works at a pace I've not seen for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think we need some quick wins, and I think he'll get some quick wins, and I think there'll be some quick wins this year. There has to be quick, because I think the world I come from, and of course I've been at this for 6 years. I know people have been for 10 years, and I keep saying, no, you can't expect things to change overnight. He wants things to change overnight, and I think you'll get some quick wins.
He needs some quick wins. Yeah. He's also working at a pace because he knows he's got a limited amount of time on this. He's an MP. He's got 4 years left in power. If there's no general election, we can see this Labour government falling in a year or two. General election, doesn't win his seat again, that's the end of it. So he knows, I've got to go hell for leather for this, because there is no tomorrow.
I've cleared my diary. I've 100% cleared my diary. I'm at the disposal of the inquiry team.
Yeah.
And I've said to him, I'll go wherever, whenever.
Yeah.
And let's get as much information out as we, because for such a long time, I know, we've been fighting on this issue when no one would listen to us. And now the nation is listening to us. We've got £600,000 raised in under a month without any media publicity.
Yeah.
Maggie Oliver's raised, I think, more or less 120,000 she wanted. I think she'll want more. I think she deserves more, and then the job will take more. But she's got some heavyweight law firms on board.
Yep.
I think she needs to go and issue proceedings as quickly as possible against one or two. So people this isn't in our control. We don't have the luxury of choice. This isn't in our control. This is the public have supported it. The public have demands of us, and it's for us not to let the public down.
Yeah.
And for me, this isn't a game. I share with you. I share with everyone. There will come a day when this is over. I'll sit on a park bench with my cheese sandwich and a flask of tea, and I'll know that when the moment came, what was asked of me, I did. And if I don't do that, I'll regret it.
Yeah.
So, I'm working with Rupert Lowe. I'm working with his team. I know he's getting more people on board, but the pace is going out is to be admired. And also, he's doing this whilst also being an MP, and also whatever nonsense him and Nigel Farage are involved in. And I think this, if there's anything I am disappointed with, is this transcends politics. I think this issue, and I'm not a side taker, Nick, when it comes to politics. I understand the divisions between people on that level, but I think reform should get behind this, just as Rupert Lowe has got behind Maggie Oliver's thing. He could have seen that as a competitor. He hasn't. I think he donated one of his mum's salaries, because he donates his salaries. He's donated one of his mum's salaries to the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and I know that he tried to get Maggie Oliver so we'd work together as part. But I agreed, she's her own brand, she does her own thing, and I'm sure they'll find a way of working together. And I'm sure the public will work out that this is what this thing's going to do. This is because Maggie Oliver's thing has to concentrate on the public prosecutions, whilst Rupert Lowe's thing has got to uncover the truth. Because Maggie Oliver will go after the people we know are involved and are pretty much banked to rights. They thought they've got away with it on police pensions or hiding in Whitehall. What Rupert needs to get to is ask those questions that actually Maggie Oliver can't ask because of her brand, because she needs to be seen as the palatable face of this. For instance, you and I...
That's all non-political.
Yeah, you and I spoke at an event on Saturday. Maggie Oliver would never go and speak at an event like that. Yeah. Because of how it might be politically framed. And rightly so, because, we couldn't go to where she goes to, or we wouldn't be allowed to go to, which is she needs to protect herself. So I'm looking forward to Maggie Oliver commencing those private prosecutions. And I'm looking forward to Rupert Lowe hosting a whole host. He's now at the evidence gathering stage, but I think very soon he'll be highlighting case studies, testimonies. If we go to Newcastle, if you go to Leeds, and we speak to, it's all easy now, isn't it? It's all off a camera. If we have the former director of Children's Services say, yes, this happened to me, yes, that happened to me, and we build up that groundswell of evidence. So, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, Charlie Peters, the GB News.
He's done some good work.
I admire the lot. I think you need people like that in this space, And he had John Perko, I think his surname is the police officer, who in Bradford was called into a meeting and threatened. And Charlie Peters interviewed him. John came to me in January. He's from Oldham. He's from Fellsworth. He's from Oldham. And I looked at it and thought, I could do this with John. It'd be great. I'd get like 10,000 views, but what good is it? It needs it's bigger than you. It's bigger than me. So I got in touch with Charlie, and Charlie ran with it. But people like John aren't unique. There's hundreds of Johns out there who tried to speak out and were shut down. So surely one strand of the work we do, which Maggie can't do, but one strand of the work we do will go to the 50,000 cities and know there are good people here. People who were in positions where they could make a difference and tried to make a difference, and they were shut down. Surely their testimonies matter. And that will build it up in the same as speaking to the survivors, in the same as speaking to the perpetrator community. So, for instance, the Rupert Lowe's team put out a snippet last week, over the weekend, from Oldham, to do with a Rochdale grooming gang member who started abusing, and it was a 3-year-old child he started with, and the name's not mentioned there, and all the rest of it, and then a whole host of comments there, and I added my 2 pence for, but all of that had been hidden from you. What's still been hidden from you, and I'll go and get the testimony in Oldham, what's still been hidden from you is the 3-year-old child who this member of the rape gangs was raping was his daughter. Right, it was his daughter, and it was his elder daughter who took his daughter, younger daughter, and repeatedly went to the police. Right. And the police repeatedly refused to investigate. Wow. So the only reason Shabir Ahmed was outed wasn't because the police arrested him because of what he did in Rochdale. It's because of an older sister's love for a younger sister. And what the police did. Now, surely there were decent social workers around there at the time, There were police officers at the time saying we should be arresting we should be and it's those testimonies we will go and find.
Most people want to do the right thing. Our job is to help them, is to open the door a little bit for them so they can walk through that door themselves and do the right thing.
And when John came to me in January, after this had all blown up, he was a haunted man.
Yeah.
He's a devout Christian, haunted man. And he needed help. And now he's transformed. Because he tried to do the right thing at the time.
Yeah.
And he looks back and he's been carrying this with him for the best part of 20 years. I tried to do the right thing at the time. This happened to me. And I got threatened with arrest. I should have said, arrest me.
Yeah. Hindsight's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah. But he's come forward, and
but now he knows he can't live with it, and he's reached out and he's found a way.
And there'll be hundreds, if not thousands of
thousands.
Yeah,
thousands.
And we need their testimonies.
Yeah.
Because what we want to get to, I think what we want to, is get to an understanding of the belief system, the cultural norms in the perpetrator community, and come up with something that mitigates against that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to come up with something that delivers justice for the survivors, which includes a compensation scheme that MPs can push through. We're doing it in Northern Ireland to the to the survivors there. So we have a duty here. Oh, it'll cost money. So what?
Yeah.
It's not like this government doesn't spend money overseas and a whole lot. We can spend it on our own children. Yeah. And I don't think there'll be a difficult sell to the public.
Yeah.
We can spend billions on foreign aid. We can spend it on reparations for our own children that we failed.
Yeah.
And then the public sector, there are decent. You worked in the public sector. I worked with people who I admire, who are decent people who shaped the way I think. So, when people say, oh, you hate the public sector, you hate the Labour. I worked with Labour politicians whose values I believe I personify because they were decent people. I worked under people in the public sector that I would, run for a wall for because because I knew they cared.
I've got a similar feeling when I heavily criticise Manchester Council all the time and councils in general. But it was only me working for the council and seeing what great work they do and seeing how many staff there cared about local communities. And it was only seeing that made me the man I am today. I used to be a lot more selfish, a lot more self-centered, a lot more, what am I getting out of this? It was only through working with Manchester Council that turned me into a better man. And because of that, I have a right to criticise councils because I know they can do better.
Yeah.
And they can do more and they can help more people. But you're right, there's many great people working in those places.
And so we're going to go and get the evidence. I think in terms of what Rupert Law's going to do, first of all, you're hiding that. They won't even list the 50 towns and cities, will they?
No.
They keep making reference to 50. They talk about industrial scale. They use the term industrial scale now. Let's put a number to it. Let's put a time frame to it.
Yeah.
And we will do that. And we'll force all of that. Let's get the court transcripts. Let's look at the patterns of what these gangs are. Okay. I agree. You agree. There are people who rape children in every community. But there's something very specific, nuanced about the grooming gangs, about the rape gangs.
It was a covering up. Yeah.
It was the motivation of the men who did it,
Yeah.
and it was the reaction of those who were tasked to protect them.
Yeah.
And let's take it to that uncomfortable place, because by only taking it to that uncomfortable place, will this nation ever come to terms with what took place? But more importantly, put in place the safeguards it needs to, so it can never happen again. That is what Rupert Law's inquiry, I aspire, I hope will deliver on.
You only get better if you take the medicine, and the medicine can be quite bitter sometimes, and we need to take the medicine.
And if some politicians end up in prison,
good,
because it will re-establish the faith that people in this country have, that no one is above the law, and that we are all equal, and even the most powerful can be brought down if they've done wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a perfect place to end.
Thank you.
Once this inquiry is up and you're running, and if you're allowed to share information and share what's
come back.
Then come on and we can update
this is transparent. The inquiry is transparent. I'm happy to say to you once a month, once a quarter, however you want, I will come and give you an update. It's no problem.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.